Evil Pixel.
Doom is one of the most well-known video games in history, known worldwide for what many may consider one of the most influential games of all time. While many gamers nowadays don't find much variety in first-person shooters out now, back in the early 90s, things were much more timid in the video game industry. Mortal Kombat stirred the pot in 1992 with the media and introduced a rating system. Doom also sought to shake things up and put first-person shooters on the map. And so it did, elevating the genre to entirely different levels and making it what it is today. But like many things, the story of Doom went through many changes and had a very humble beginning, owing much of its creation to a not-so-violent innocent kid game. And so in today's video, we'll be looking at the history and early development of Doom. The story of Doom begins in 1989. Colorado native John Romero joined the company Softdisk, based in Louisiana, as a programmer. Softdisk was a software company that mainly focused on disk-based magazines. While that sounds very odd in today's age, floppy disks were a common media back in the 90s, and these diskettes were an interesting form of magazine distribution. But let's rewind just a little bit further. John Romero began programming at an early age, being introduced to an Apple II computer he received as a kid. Romero showed talent as a programmer at a very young age, publishing his first game, Scout Search, in 1984 through Insider magazine. For the next few years, he would be involved in the creation of many games, even starting his own company, Capital Idea Software. This eventually led to him obtaining a job at Softdisk in Louisiana, where he eventually was put in charge of a gaming division called Gamer's Edge within the company. During this endeavor, he hired a freelancing programmer named John Carmack. John Carmack was born in Shawnee Mission, Kansas. Similar to John Romero, he was exposed to video games and programming at an early age. He attended the University of Missouri until he decided to drop out and just do freelance programming. John Romero then hired John Carmack to join his Gamer's Edge division at Softdisk Publishing. Within the Softdisk company, there was an artist by the name of Adrian Carmack, no relation to John Carmack, just a coincidence. Now John Romero and Adrian became close friends, and Romero managed to convince Adrian to assist his Gamer's Edge division. Romero also persuaded Tom Hall, an editor and programmer at Softdisk Publishing, to assist them with game design during his time off, including weekends. At that point, the team at Softdisk consisted of John Romero, John Carmack, Adrian Carmack, and Tom Hall. They were put in charge of creating games for the Softdisk Publishing Company through their Gamer's Edge division. Slordax: The Unknown Enemy was the team's first game, released in 1991. Alongside this, they also developed a game called Dangerous Dave, which was one of Gamer's Edge's more noticeable games back in the day. It was a simple side-scrolling platformer. Now, during the development of Slordax: The Unknown Enemy, John Carmack discovered a way to create smooth side-scrolling on the PC. With this knowledge, John and Tom created a quick demo showing this new smooth side-scrolling in action. The demo was called Dangerous Dave in copyright infringement. The demo was pretty much a bootleg version of Super Mario Bros. 3, only they replaced Mario with their character Dangerous Dave. On September 20th of 1990, John Carmack and Tom Hall gave Romero a disc of their demo. Now, needless to say, Romero was very impressed, and he was quoted as saying this led to his eureka moment. This is when the idea of id Software was born. This was huge due to the fact that no PC game at that time had smooth scrolling pixels. Romero and his team then began working on a pitch to show off this feat. So they built a PC port of Super Mario Bros. 3, which included Mario, to show Nintendo. For any longtime followers of ours, We actually made a video about this Super Mario Bros. 3 port in an older video. I'll leave a link in the description below if anyone's interested. But long story short, while Nintendo was impressed by this demo, they ultimately decided not to publish the game on PC because they wanted to keep their games on Nintendo consoles and hardware, which honestly was a smart move on their part. It was around this time that Scott Miller from Apogee Software became aware of Romero and his team's impressive feats. So he began contacting them through letters and making it seem as if though it were different fans. John Romero noticed all the letters were coming from the same address and found out it was Miller all along writing to the team. Now the reason why he did this is because Softdisk Publishing screened all of its letters it received and didn't want to get in any trouble. Romero used the demo presented to Nintendo and showed it to Tom Miller to pitch the Commander Keen series. Miller was all in to work with them. Now it was agreed that Commander Keen would be distributed through Shareware, which was popularized by Apogee. Shareware is a form of distribution where software would be provided free to any user who are then encouraged to share the program and possibly make donations. Software is usually downloaded from a site or disk. Now needless to say, Commander Keen was very successful and was able to provide the Gamers Edge team with income to branch off on their own. And so Commander Keen began the start of id Software. The team of 4 then left Softdisk Publishing and founded id Software on February 1st of 1991. They were able to create the entire Commander Keen trilogy in 3 months, published by Apogee. This was possible by them utilizing the same engine on all 3 games, pioneering the idea of gaming engines. This caught on quick, and then the team soon began licensing their gaming engines to others in 1991. id Software worked their games through ideologies and principles, one of which being that it's very important that your game can always be run by your team and never hope that it could be fixed later. This led to Romero creating tools to assist in his team's ease of developing games. TED being one of the earliest editing tools created by Romero. Utilizing these ideologies and tools, the team decided to tackle 3D with the game Catacombs 3D. They saw 3D as being the future, and Catacombs 3D looked really cool at the time. The only issue was that the game itself wasn't very fun. So they decided to rectify that by strictly focusing on 3D games from there out, and began working on Wolfenstein 3D. Now one cannot discuss Doom's development without mentioning Wolfenstein 3D. Wolfenstein 3D was released in mid-1992 by id Software, and it took them about 6 months to develop the game, and all of its episodes. Now Wolfenstein 3D in itself broke its own grounds, taking very sensitive subjects such as the portrayal of Nazis and Hitler and animal violence and portraying them in game. The game was even banned in Germany due to this. It's also considered as one of the first true first-person shooter games and the grandfather of the genre, so it deserves its own praise. Wolfenstein 3D led to John Carmack spending months planning their next big game. He went back and reflected to what him and Romero enjoyed the most, which was Dungeons & Dragons. The team would oftentimes play Dungeons & Dragons campaigns on their breaks from developing video games. Their usual campaigns consisted of demons and hellspawns. They were also huge fans of the Alien movie series and Evil Dead. The idea behind their next big game was to be a mash of all these things combined. The team wanted this game to be far superior than their previous games looking back at their side-scrollers, so they decided to use the more advanced Next Step workstations on their game. John Carmack was hard at work creating a new gaming engine which would calculate vertical 3D space. Unlike the engine used for Wolfenstein 3D, which utilized a form of rendering called raycasting, which would only give the illusion of 3D space utilizing sprite data. The art and program designers Tom Hall and Adrian Carmack then began writing designs and documents for the next project, which they decided to call Doom. Although very impressive, John Carmack turned down the story given to him by Tom Hall, stating that in games like this, story isn't necessarily important, they just wanted to make the game as fun as possible and playable. The rest of the team agreed, and the plot and story of Doom was ultimately canned to something much more vague. With this new workstation, John Romero was able to create a tool to assist in development of Doom, which he called DoomEd. During this time, team art designer Adrian Carmack made clay models of the enemies for the game. These clay models were then scanned and placed in the game as sprites. With the assistance of DoomEd and the sprites in place, the team at id created a tech demo of Doom. Now this alpha build is the earliest known alpha build of Doom, known as Doom 0.2. It first showed up online in 2002 on the site doomworld.com for the public to see. The source of the alpha build stated that it was from February of 1993. The alpha build of this game was only given to playtesters in order to record their progress. Now the tech demo itself consists of only one level, one weapon, which is a shotgun that looks slightly different from this final version, and a few monsters. Now even though you can shoot in the demo, the enemies are not able to be harmed. There is absolutely no hit detection at all. And as you can see, the original HUD of the game placed the player inside the helmet of the protagonist, which we now call Doomslayer. There are also some writings on the walls, ceilings, and floor stating "Jules sucks," referring to Adrian Jules Carmack, and "Tom is king," referring to Tom Hall. Fortunately for us, there was another alpha build of the game released named Doom 0.3. Now this version of the game displayed more textures, including boxes, panels, and higher ceilings, utilizing a technique called binary space partitioning in order to make texturizing the maps more easily. The HUD also displayed a working map that displayed where the player currently was. And you and I can see the HUD of the game at this point was very cluttered and seemed to show information that was irrelevant. And so in the next build presented of the game, the HUD was completely changed to a much more simple horizontal bar on the screen displaying health, shield, armor, and ammo. And they also added a cool looking bayonet to the shotgun, which could also be used. It was around this time that Tom Hall began to notice that his vision of Doom was vastly different from everyone else's. So he parted ways with the company. Many believe that Tom Hall was disappointed that the team was so quick at turning down his plot and story handles for Doom, and that is what led to him leaving. Now upon his departure, Sandy Peterson and Dave Taylor were hired to pick up where Tom left off. Now shortly after this, there was a much more interesting build of Doom presented, named Doom 0.4. The title screen of this build stated, "Hey man, if this gets out, you can all kiss your autographed Doom hint books goodbye." Obviously hinting at people who received it to not let anyone else see it. Now this version displayed yet another redesign of the HUD that looked more similar to what we got in the final version. This build showed off even more textures, models, animated floors, and even a prone mode that was inevitably scrapped. But it was reported that this prone mode was pretty much the same animation as the death scene, where the Doomslayer would just go down to the ground. However, the enemies were still non-interactable, and the walls actually prevented the player from clipping through them. Now this led to the next build of the game, which was called Doom 0.5. Now in this version of the game, the enemies were actually able to be hit and killed. However, they simply disappeared, they didn't just die. They also added power-ups and ammunition. The HUD was changed yet again to a more gray and black tone to match the environment, and you were also able to select your difficulty level of gameplay. And of course, this was preceded to the beta build known as Doom 0.9. This build was similar to what we got on release. The HUD was changed yet again to its final version that we received, and the few weapons were removed and replaced completely. The assault rifle and machine gun were replaced with the pistol and Gatling gun, and the Skull Lost Souls enemies had unavoidable attacks which could only be avoided if you were not in their presence. The BFG 9000 gun shot a volley of orbs as opposed to just one big orb in the final version. The plasma gun also shot green and red orbs as opposed to blue, and the enemies would actually fall down and die in this version, with animations implemented. Now there was also a multiplayer co-op mode added which would allow the players to play through the game with another individual, as well as a deathmatch multiplayer mode to get head-to-head with others in a special arena. Now throughout these builds, there were things that were removed altogether to steer away from any controversy and not offend its player base, such as unholy Bibles, regular Bibles, demonic daggers, bloody chalices, evil scepters, pentagrams, and flesh walls, just to name a few. Most of the items and ammo picked up look completely different as well. In my opinion, they actually look better in the beta build than what we got in the final version, as they used to look what they actually represented, such as a box of shotgun shells or stim packs. Now there was also a slew of unused music for Doom, which in June of 2007, John Romero compiled a list of MIDI tracks which were intended to be used in the game. Now a majority of the tracks were inspired by heavy metal band songs from its time. Some of these artists include Alice in Chains, Soundgarden, and SOD. I'll leave a link in the description below if anyone is interested. Doom was so popular on release that it crashed several network servers. Many universities put a ban on students attempting to download the game on school servers. And the media did go after Doom during the Columbine shooting incident after the shooters claimed they were huge fans of the game. Now with every successful game comes growth, and so with the success stemming from Doom's release, it was quick to begin developing the sequel, Doom 2. Doom 2 further expanded on everything that made the first game so good. Different level designs, harder difficulties, new enemies, new weapons, and they continue to emphasize the concept of keeping the game fun instead of heavily story-based. After Doom's release, John Romero was inspired by his own creation, but wanted it used in a different setting. So he worked with Raven Software and created Heretic, which was much more inventory-based. This in turn led to the development of Quake in 1995, with a fresh clean slate using no Doom codes at all. And just a fun fact, John Cash, who worked on Quake's engine code, ended up becoming the lead programmer in a small little unknown game called World of Warcraft. Now even though the ideas based around Doom was rather simple, no one was able to quite pull it off. The original team at id Software centered their principles around simple ideologies. Just make the game fun and improve on it. And Doom went on to influence what many games are today. Even with its own Quake game, it popularized clans, esports, and tournaments almost immediately upon release. There simply isn't enough time in one video to explain how influential Doom has been to the gaming industry. The game has been reworked, re-released, and came out in just about every single relevant platform at the time. It's been so popular in fact that it even spawned a movie, albeit not very good, but it still spawned the movie. And so the story of Doom is a fascinating one to say the least, and what's even more impressive is that it's still going today. With Doom Eternal being its most recent release, it's actually been received very well by fans with a 9.10 rating on Steam alone. Now who knows what's next for the Doom franchise, even though it went on a hiatus for several years. With how fun Doom Eternal is, I think it's a perfect example that Doom is here to stay. Thank you guys for watching. Check out some of our other videos if you like. And if you enjoyed this video, check out our Patreon and think about becoming a contributor, in order to help the channel bring you these videos much quicker. And I'll catch you all next time.